August 9, 1942. 200 hours. The waters off Savo Island, Solomon Islands. The humidity acts like a physical weight, pressing down on the bridge of the USS Chicago. It is pitch black, the kind of heavy, suffocating darkness you only find in the deep Pacific, miles from civilization. Signalman First Class Miller keeps his eyes glued to the horizon, his knuckles white as he grips the railing. The radio room behind him is buzzing with a frenetic, terrifying energy. The static hisses like a nest of vipers. Inside that static there are voices, but they aren't American. "They're jamming us again, sir," the radio operator shouts, sweat dripping from his nose onto the logbook. "I'm picking up chatter, fast, efficient." Japanese intelligence officers are listening. They aren't just listening, they are predicting. For months, the Imperial Japanese Navy has been intercepting American communications with embarrassing ease. The United States military is relying on mathematical encryption. Machines, bulky, delicate cylinders that look like typewriters crossed with clocks. They work, but they are agonizingly slow. To encode a single message about an incoming torpedo squadron takes 30 minutes. To decode it takes another 30. In war, 30 minutes is a lifetime. Tonight, it is a death sentence. Flares suddenly rip the darkness apart. Japanese cruisers slipping through the black water like sharks open fire. The Allied fleet is caught sleeping. Orders to maneuver are typed, encoded, transmitted, received, and decoded. By the time the captain on the receiving end reads the order to turn hard to port, his ship is already burning. The ocean turns into a cauldron of oil and fire. The Battle of Savo Island becomes one of the worst naval defeats in American history. And amidst the screaming steel and drowning sailors, one truth becomes painfully clear. The enemy knows what we are saying before we do. 2 weeks later, Los Angeles, California. The sunlight is blinding. On the pavement outside the Marine Corps recruitment office, a stark contrast to the gloom of the Solomons. Philip Johnston, a civil engineer in a fedora and a cheap suit, steps out of his car. He clutches a newspaper with a grim headline about the Pacific losses. Johnston is a peculiar man for a military savior. He isn't a cryptographic genius. He isn't a general. He is the son of missionaries who grew up on the Navajo reservation. He speaks the language fluently, a language that has no written form, a language with syntax so complex and tones so subtle that German scholars in the 1930s had tried and failed to document it. He walks into the office of Major James E. Jones, the signal officer at Camp Elliott. The office smells of stale coffee and cigarette smoke. Maps of the Pacific are pinned to the walls, covered in red markers that indicate retreating lines. "I have a solution for your communication problem, Major," Johnston says, slapping his hat on the desk. Major Jones looks. Up, eyes tired, skepticism etched into the deep lines of his face. He's heard it all before. New machines, new ciphers, all of them breakable, all of them slow. "I'm listening," Jones grunts, though his body language says he's dismissing the man already. "Navajo," Johnston says. "The Navajo language, it's unintelligible to anyone who hasn't been immersed in it since birth. No alphabet, no symbols. If we train Navajos to speak a code within their language, the Japanese will never break it." The major leans back, a smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. He looks at his aide, then back at Johnston. The idea seems almost comical to the military brass. These are the 1940s. The military view of Native Americans is steeped in stereotypes and mistrust. The idea of handing the most sensitive tactical communications of the war to a group of men from the reservation. Men who, in many cases, have been told by the U.S. government to stop speaking their language at boarding schools, seems ludicrous. "We tried Choctaw in the last war," Jones says dismissively, waving a hand. "It didn't work well enough, too many limitations. Besides, Mr. Johnston, you're talking about taking civilians and turning them into specialized radio operators overnight. Do you have any idea the logistics involved?" "I can demonstrate it," Johnston insists, leaning over the desk. "Give me 2 Navajos, put them in separate rooms, give us a message." Jones sighs. He checks his watch. He has a meeting in 10 minutes. But the reports from Guadalcanal are piling up on his desk, reports of dead Marines who died waiting for orders. "Fine," Jones says, clearly expecting a farce. "You have 15 minutes, don't waste my time." He doesn't know it yet, but he has just authorized the most unbreakable weapon the Marine Corps will ever wield. But as Johnston leaves the room to gather his demonstrators, he hears the laughter from the hallway, officers joking about smoke signals and war whoops. They have no idea what's coming. May 4th, 1942, the Navajo Nation, Window Rock, Arizona. The wind sweeps across the red sandstone, kicking up dust that settles in the creases of worn denim and leather boots. A line of young men stands outside a small wooden administrative building. They are quiet, stoic, watching the recruiting officer with dark, attentive eyes. They have come from the deep canyons and the high mesas. Some have walked for miles. Some have lied about their age, claiming 18 when they are barely 16. They are the first 29. The irony hanging in the dry desert air is thick enough to choke on. Many of these young men, like Chester Nez, attended government boarding schools only a few years prior. In those cold, sterile classrooms, the rule was absolute: speak English. If they spoke Navajo, their mouths were washed out with soap. They were beaten with rulers. They were told their language was backward, useless, a relic of a savage past that needed to be erased for them to become civilized. Now, the same government that tried to beat the language out of them is begging for it. June 1942, Marine Corps Recruit Depot, San Diego. The bus screeches to a halt. The doors hiss open, and the shouting begins immediately. "Get off my bus, move, move, move." The drill instructors are looming giants in starch and polish, their campaign covers pulled low over screaming faces. The recruits scramble onto the yellow footprints painted on the asphalt. The culture shock is violent. For boys used to the open silence of the reservation, the noise of San Diego is deafening. But it's the eyes of the other recruits that cut the deepest. "Hey, Chief," a voice sneers from the back of the chow line. "You gonna scalp some Japs for us?" Laughter ripples through the platoon. It's casual, cruel, and constant. To the white Marines from Brooklyn, Iowa, and Georgia, these 29 men are curiosities at best and liabilities at worst. They are called Wampum. Geronimo and Chief. They are mocked for their silence, their features, and their heritage. During radio training, the mockery intensifies. The standard Marine protocol is rigid, everything by the book. But these 29 are pulled out of standard rotation. They are marched into a guarded classroom, the windows covered, the door locked. Inside, the atmosphere shifts, the shouting stops. The DIs aren't in charge here, the 29 are. "We have to build an alphabet," one of them says, looking at the blank chalkboard, "and words for things our ancestors never saw. There is no word in the Navajo language for dive bomber. There is no word for tank, submarine, or artillery barrage. If they just spell everything out letter by letter using Navajo words, it will be too slow, just as slow as the machines. They need shorthand. They need poetry that kills." They sit in a circle, the way their fathers and grandfathers did in the Hogans. They brainstorm. The air grows heavy with cigarette smoke and concentration. "A tank," one suggests, thinking of the hard shell and the way it crawls over the earth. "It is a turtle," Che Dagahai. "A fighter plane," another asks. "It moves fast, it darts, it hums," Dahitihai, hummingbird. "A battleship," Lotso, whale. "America, Nihima, our mother." It is brilliant in its simplicity. They are building a code based on nature, assigning the fauna of the American Southwest to the machinery of modern industrial warfare. Grenades become potatoes. Bombs become eggs. Pyrotechnics become flares. But the alphabet is the real masterstroke. To spell out names of places like Guadalcanal, they create a phonetic alphabet using Navajo words. A becomes Walatchi, ant. B becomes shush, bear. C becomes Mosi, cat. The training is brutal. They have to memorize hundreds of these terms. There are no code books allowed in the field. If a book is captured, the code is broken. The code must live entirely inside. Their heads, they drill until their throats are raw. Walatchi, shush, Mosi, ant, bear, cat. Outside the locked room, the other Marines are still laughing. They see the Navajos muttering to themselves, making gibberish noises. The skepticism reaches all the way to the top. A colonel walks in one afternoon looking to shut the program down. He thinks it's a waste of resources. "Let's see what you've got," the colonel barks. He hands a message to a Navajo private. "Send this to the other room, let's see how long it takes." The message is complex. Artillery coordinates, enemy positions, movement orders. On a standard machine, this would take 30 minutes to encrypt and transmit. The private picks up the microphone. He takes a breath. The strange, guttural, tonal sounds of the Athabascan language flood the room. To the colonel's ears, it sounds like water flowing over rocks, unintelligible, rhythmic, alien. Bishlo Chedaga al-Naashi. In the other room, the second Navajo writes furiously. He doesn't pause to look up a cipher. He doesn't spin a dial on a machine. He just listens and translates instantly. 20 seconds later, the door opens. The second private hands the colonel a piece of paper. It is the message, word for word, perfect accuracy. The colonel looks at the paper, then at the stopwatch, then at the chiefs he had dismissed moments ago. The laughter in the room dies instantly. 30 minutes has just become 20 seconds. But a classroom in San Diego is not a foxhole in the Pacific. The real test isn't whether they can impress a colonel. The real test is whether they can survive the battlefield where everyone, including their own side, might try to kill them. November 1st, 1943, Empress Augusta Bay, Bougainville. The ramp of the Higgins boat slams into the wet sand, and the world explodes. Mortar shells kick up geysers of black mud and salt water. The air is thick with the smell of cordite and rotting vegetation. Private First Class. Harry Tsosie hits the beach running, a 30-pound radio strapped to his back. He isn't carrying a rifle in his hands. He's carrying the lifeline for the entire 3rd Marine Division. Around him, men are screaming for medics, for ammo, for cover. He dives behind a fallen coconut log, the wood splintering as a Japanese Nambu machine gun rakes the beach. He fumbles with the handset, his fingers slick with mud and sweat. He needs to call in the coordinates of that gun nest before it wipes out the second wave. "Blue Beach 1 to command," he shouts, but the channel is a mess. "Get off the line," a voice screams back through the static, a terrified radio man on a destroyer offshore. "Jap chatter, they're jamming us, clear the net." The irony is immediate and deadly. The radio man on the ship hears Tsosie's voice and assumes it's the enemy. To a kid from Iowa or the Bronx, the abrupt, chopping sounds of the Navajo language sound dangerously similar to the rapid-fire cadence of Japanese. Tsosie doesn't switch to English. That would be suicide. If he speaks English, the Japanese listeners in the jungle bunkers a few hundred yards away will understand the coordinates and move their guns before the shells land. He has to trust the system. He has to trust that on the other end, in the command center of the flagship, another Navajo is listening. He presses the transmit button again. He closes his eyes, blocking out the screams of the wounded. "Jenny Dize, Nashchi Dize. Hawk elk nut, elk HENE coordinates." He rattles off the string of nature words. It sounds like a shamanistic chant amidst the mechanical roar of war. On the USS President Adams, deep in the radio room, Private Jimmy King, one of the first 29, perks up. The other radio operators are frantic, trying to decipher the jamming. King holds up a hand, silencing them. "It's not jamming," King says calmly. He writes down the coordinates as fast as Tsosie speaks. "Them. Fire mission," King barks, handing the slip to the gunnery officer. "Sector 4, Box 7. "Are you sure?" the officer demands. "We haven't verified that code." "It's verified," King says, his voice hard. "Fire." 30 seconds later, the Nambu gun nest on the beach disappears in a thunderclap of high-explosive naval artillery. On the beach, the Marines near Tsosie stare at him. They had been mocking him on the transport ship, calling him Chief, making war-whoop noises when he walked by. Now they look at the smoking crater where the machine gun used to be, and then back at the quiet Navajo kid wiping mud off his microphone. The laughter is gone. But the danger isn't. Later that night, the perimeter is tense. The jungle is alive with noise, crickets, rain, the snap of twigs. Japanese infiltrators are famous for sneaking into foxholes with knives. Paranoia is the only constant. Tsosie is moving low through the brush, trying to lay a wire to a forward observation post. He steps into a clearing, the moonlight catching his high cheekbones and dark skin. Halt! The bolt of an M1 Garand slides home. A young Marine sentry, eyes wide with terror and lack of sleep, has his rifle aimed squarely at Tsosie's chest. Identify, the sentry screams, his finger trembling on the trigger. Marine, 3rd Division, Tsosie shouts, raising his hands. Bullshit, the sentry yells. You look like a Jap to me, drop the radio. It happens in a heartbeat. The sentry is seconds away from firing. In the darkness, the racial ambiguity of the Navajo soldiers is a fatal liability. They are fighting for a country that doesn't fully claim them, against an enemy they physically resemble in the eyes of their ignorant comrades. Stand down, Marine. A sergeant crashes through the bush, shoving the sentry's rifle barrel toward the mud. He grabs the sentry by the collar. That's a code talker, you moron. He's worth more than your whole squad. The sentry lowers his weapon. Shaking, Tsosie doesn't say a word. He just picks up his wire spool and keeps moving into the dark. The command quickly realizes the problem. They assign bodyguards to the code talkers, but the orders given to these bodyguards are grim. They are there to protect the Navajos from the Japanese, yes. They are there to protect them from friendly fire, yes. But there is a third secret order. If capture is imminent, if the Japanese are about to take a code talker alive, the bodyguard is to shoot the Navajo. The code is more important than the man. It is the only secret the enemy hasn't broken, and it must never be taken. Tsosie knows this, they all know it, and yet they keep talking. February 19th, 1945, 8:59 hours, Iwo Jima. The ocean is gray, the sky is gray, and the beach ahead is black. It isn't sand. It's volcanic ash, loose and shifting like granulated charcoal. Corporal Thomas Begay is crammed into an Amtrak, the diesel fumes burning his throat. He is clutching his radio, his heart hammering against his ribs. Around him, young Marines are vomiting from seasickness and terror. They know what awaits them. The ramp drops. The first step onto the black sand is a nightmare. It sucks at their boots, slowing them to a crawl. And then Mount Suribachi opens up. The Japanese have had years to prepare. They have honeycombed the island with 18 miles of tunnels. They aren't on the island, they are in it. As the first wave of Marines struggles up the terraces of ash, the hidden artillery positions unleash hell. Begay hits the dirt, or rather the warm, sulfurous ash. A mortar shell lands 20 feet away, vaporizing 2 men instantly. The air is so thick with shrapnel it feels solid. Get me fire support, a lieutenant screams, grabbing Begay by the shoulder. They're slaughtering us, Sector 3, Grid 4, Baker. Begay is already dialing. His hands are steady despite the chaos. This is the moment the entire program was built for. There is no time for encryption machines. There is no time for lookup tables. If he takes 30 minutes, everyone on this beach dies. He keys the mic. Bishlo ata tikin, gla. Iron fish, waiting, ice rabbit. He is speaking to a code talker on a battleship offshore. He isn't just calling for fire, he is directing a symphony of destruction. He calls for naval gunfire, then air support, then tank movement. He switches frequencies. He coordinates with 3 different units simultaneously. For the next 48 hours, Begay and 5 other Navajo Code Talkers work non-stop. They do not sleep. They do not eat. They transmit over 800 messages without a single error. Major Howard Connor, the signal officer for the 5th Marine Division, watches in awe. He sees runners getting shot down. He sees wire lines being cut by mortar fire. The only thing piercing the fog of war is the Navajo voice. It cuts through the static like a knife. Deep in the tunnels of Mount Suribachi, Japanese intelligence. Officers are hunched over their own radios. They are the best cryptographers in the empire. They have broken American codes before. They have broken British codes. They are disciplined, intelligent men. But they are losing their minds. What is it? A Japanese officer demands, slamming his fist on the table as the strange sounds pour from the speaker. It sounds like bubbling water, the radio man stammers. It sounds like nothing human. They record it, they slow it down, they try to match it to known dialects. But because the code uses Navajo words to represent other words, a whale is a battleship, but a whale could also just be a whale in conversation. Context is impossible to decipher. The syntax is backward. The verbs are conjugated by aspect, not time. To the Japanese ear, it is a wall of gibberish. Back on the surface, the battle rages. The Marines are pinned down by a massive bunker complex. A tank unit, Shermans with flamethrowers, is trying to move up, but they are blind. Begay sees the tank commander waving frantically. The tank's radio is out. Begay sprints. He runs through a gauntlet of machine gun fire, the black sand kicking up around his boots. He reaches the tank, climbs onto the back, and hammers on the hatch. He hands the handset to the commander. No, he becomes the radio. He relays the tank's position to the artillery. Che Dagahi El Naashi. Turtle 2. Moments later, a salvo of 105 shells whistles overhead, smashing the bunkers into concrete dust. The tanks surge forward. The line moves. By the time the flag goes up on Suribachi, the Code Talkers are exhausted, their voices raspy, their faces caked in gray ash. They have been the nervous system of the entire invasion. Without them, the Marines would have been deaf, dumb, and blind. But as the cheers go up for the flag raising, that iconic moment captured in Joe Rosenthal's photograph, the Navajos are already back on the radio. The battle isn't over. They are. Calling in casualty reports, they are calling in supply drops. A.K. Delaney. Victor. They have won the island. They have proven the major wrong. They have proven the drill instructors wrong. The Wampum and Chief Mockery has died in the throat of every Marine who saw them work. Now there is only respect. But as the ships pack up and the war turns toward Okinawa and the Japanese mainland, a new order comes down from Washington. It is a cold, bureaucratic order that will haunt them for decades. The code is still classified. The Navajos are not to speak of it, not to their wives, not to their children, not to anyone. The war is ending, but their silence is just beginning. August 15, 1945, VJ Day. The news rips through the Pacific like a shockwave. Japan surrenders. Sailors kiss nurses in Times Square. Ticker tape rains down on New York City. The world exhales a collective sigh of relief. But inside a nondescript office in San Francisco, a Marine intelligence officer sits across from Corporal Chester Nez. The mood is not celebratory, it is cold. You are to speak to no one about your specific duties, the officer says, sliding a document across the metal desk. Not your wife, not your parents, not your children. If you are asked what you did in the war, you were a radio operator. You hauled equipment. Is that clear? Yes, sir, Nez replies. He signs the paper. The threat hangs heavy in the room. Even though the Empire of Japan has fallen, the Cold War is already casting its shadow. The military believes the Navajo Code might be needed again. It is too valuable to declassify. It is a weapon that must be kept in the holster, hidden from the Soviets, hidden from the world. October 1945, Gallup, New Mexico. The bus kicks up dust as it pulls away, leaving Nez standing on the side of Highway 66. He is wearing his dress blues, the fabric stiff and hot. He hefts his sea bag onto his shoulder and begins the long walk toward the canyon. There are no parades here. There are no brass bands playing the Marines' hymn. There is just the wind and the smell of sagebrush. When he walks into his family's hogan, his grandmother weeps. His father grips his hand. They ask him the questions every soldier hears. Where did you go? What did you see? Nez looks at them. He sees the faces of the men he lost on Peleliu. He hears the screams of the dying on the black sands of Iwo Jima. He remembers the taste of the radio microphone and the frantic, rhythmic chanting that saved thousands of lives. I just used the radio, he says quietly. I carried the box. His family nods, perhaps a little disappointed. They don't know that he is a hero. They don't know that the Marine Corps, the most elite fighting force on the planet, literally couldn't move without him. To his own people, he is just another boy who came back. The years drift by like sand dunes. The code talkers scatter. They become mechanics, teachers, farmers, artists, but the war stays with them. In the dead of night, they wake up sweating, their hands reaching for a microphone that isn't there. They hear the static. They hear the mortar whistles. But they cannot talk about it. They cannot go to the VFW hall and swap stories about the code. They cannot explain why a thunderstorm sounds like artillery. The isolation is crushing. Many turn to the bottle to quiet the voices they are forbidden to share. 1968, the Pentagon. 23 years later, the world has changed. Vietnam is raging. Satellites and computers are replacing the old ways. The Navajo Code, once the cutting edge of cryptography, is finally deemed obsolete. A stamp hits a file, DCLASSIFID. The news trickles out slowly at first, then like a dam breaking. The Marine Corps admits the existence of the program. They release the dictionary. Suddenly, the phone rings in a small house in Arizona. It rings in a trailer in New Mexico. Is it true? A reporter asks. Did you really use the language? The old Marines, now gray-haired and weathered, straighten their backs. The silence is broken. Reunions are organized. The first 29 are tracked down. The men who were once laughed at, who were called Chief and Wampum, who were told their language was a badge of ignorance, are invited to the White House. July 26, 2001, the U.S. Capitol Rotunda. President George W. Bush stands before a line of elderly men in yellow shirts and red caps. They move slowly now, some in wheelchairs, their hands trembling with age. But their eyes are the same, dark, alert, proud. The president presents the Congressional Gold Medal, the highest civilian honor the United States can bestow. We are a nation of many people, the president says, his voice echoing in the vast dome. But in our darkest hour, we spoke with one voice, and that voice was Navajo. Chester Nez, one of the original 29, accepts the medal. He touches the gold surface. He thinks of the boarding schools. He thinks of the soap in his mouth. He thinks of the laughing recruits in San Diego. And then he thinks of the radio. The Japanese intelligence officers, the brilliant minds of an empire, never broke the code. Not a single message was deciphered. It remains the only oral military code in modern history to never be cracked. The language they tried to kill was the language that saved them. Nez looks out at the crowd, at the generals saluting him, at the senators applauding. He smiles, a slow, deep smile. A.K. Delaney, he whispers to himself. Victor,